May 24th, 2010, South Korea slapped a handful of economic sanctions on North Korea for its torpedo attack on a South Korean warship that killed 46 South Korean sailors.
Now, 4 years later, the sanctions remain in place, but some say they should be lifted for the sake of improving inter-Korean relations. Our Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee joins us live to paint us a clearer picture. Now, Sung-hee, let's start with the sanctions themselves.
Well, Conn-young, the so-called May 24th sanctions cut off all government-led financial support for North Korea, suspended inter-Korean projects, and banned new investments in the north except for their jointly run Kaesong Industrial Complex. Now, this in response to North Korea's sinking of the South Korean warship Cheonan. But as you said, Conn-young, many North Korea experts are now calling for the sanctions to be lifted. A recent survey of North Korea experts shows that 9 out of 10 respondents said the sanctions should be either lifted or eased to expand inter-Korean economic ties and ease tensions on the peninsula.
And Sung-hee, also the sanctions have had a significant effect on economic cooperation between the two Koreas.
That's right. Inter-Korean economic cooperation tumbled after the 2010 sanctions were put in place. At one point, trade volume between the two Koreas stood at nearly $3 billion, but this has dropped to around $1 to $2 billion. This, of course, is because the only inter-Korean economic project today is the Kaesong Industrial Complex. Experts say the sanctions have caused more damage to South Korea than North Korea.
South Korean small and medium-sized companies and conglomerates that invest in North Korea are now seeing economic losses from the May 24th sanctions. In contrast, North Korea has expanded trade with its allies like China and Russia, which have helped to minimize its losses from the sanctions.
And in fact, data released by the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency yesterday shows that North Korea's trade volume jumped nearly 8% last year from the year earlier to over $7 billion. Trade with China made up around 90% of that total as Pyongyang's economic dependence on Beijing continues to grow.
Right, Sung-hee, and we know that President Park Geun-hye has been placing much emphasis on the need for a Korean reunification. Now, would you say lifting these sanctions factor in with that vision?
Well, that's right. They're not only getting in the way of realizing a handful of inter-Korean projects put forth by President Park, but also efforts to prepare for a reunified Korea. The 결의말 근사전 Committee started out in 2005 with an ambitious goal of narrowing the language gap between the two Koreas by creating a joint dictionary. It's an important project, considering that the average South Korean only understands roughly 50% of the North Korean dialect and vice versa. Divided into two teams, South Korean and North Korean, they had been meeting about 4 times a year to work on the dictionary. But the project has been at a standstill for 4 years now, when the May 24th sanctions were put in place.
We haven't been able to hold meetings with the North Korean committee since 2010. The South Korean committee has finished our portion of the work over the 4 years, but we must receive the North Korean portion, which will make up about half of the dictionary.
Experts say lifting of the sanctions will serve as the first vital step towards bringing the two Koreas together. This, as most of President Park Geun-hye's inter-Korean project proposals, such as the Eurasia Initiative, a construction of railways running from South Korea to Europe via North Korea, Russia, and China, demand fresh investments in the north. But will the sanctions be lifted once and for all?
Rather than an immediate lifting of the May 24th sanctions, South Korea could become more flexible with the measures following its local elections on June 4th, and as positive changes are seen in inter-Korean relations and North Korea's nuclear program.
Well, the South Korean government, however, stresses that the May 24th sanctions will remain in place until North Korea takes responsibility for its attack on the South Korean warship Cheonan 4 years ago.
Well, they were there for a good reason before, and we'll have to think hard and long about what should be done in the future. Thank you for that report, Sung-hee.